Can I take this off? Is that all right? It will be hard for you to hear and see me if I don't have this on. So my name is Florence Tandy. I'm the CEO of an organization called Leadership Bridges. We work primarily with nonprofits and community boards. We do strategic planning, team building, board governance training, and that sort of thing for community groups, nonprofits, and government groups. Most recently, something that you all will be interested in, I helped the Danville-Bull County Humane Society with their new strategic plan this spring. And that was just the most fun group to work with. So I even kind of miss them. I'm like, well, the project's done. They've paid me, but I'd like to hang out with them still. They're fun.
Now, where do you live?
I'm sorry?
Where do you live?
I live in Erlanger, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, up in the north.
Oh, well, we would get you on that board out there.
A little bit too far away, but they're a good board. That's the best board I've ever worked with, by the way.
Until now.
Well, true, but it's a different kind of board. Different kind of board. So as I'm looking around the room, I know we're going to have a really good and productive morning. I had thought when I was preparing this, I actually prepared for management staff to be part of this discussion, but we will have our surrogate of Earl and Ashley standing in for them to make sure that they get the message. And I probably will skip a little bit of the stuff that I was going to talk about because they're not going to be in the room. So let's get started. I want to, the agenda for the day, you've got the actual agenda with you, but I'll go over kind of briefly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about general duties of all boards, what all boards are expected to do and the way they're expected to behave, whether it's private nonprofits, governments, companies, Girl Scouts, anybody. Once we get that out of the way, we're going to move on to the specific roles that each of you play in your role as the Board of Commissioners. And then we'll finish with some discussion about what the research says about successful cities and how you can be and continue to be that. And then we're going to apply some of that thinking to help make Danville a better place to live, work, and play. Danville's already got so much going for it, and you certainly don't need me to come and tell you how to run your business, but we'll talk about the research and some of the things that other cities have done to assure success. So does that sound good?
Yep.
So I wanted to start with talking about the challenges that you face. Your town, and every town in the country really, has the hardest job there is in governance, in my opinion. You work in a place and you work for people who know their elected officials personally and probably aren't afraid to express their opinions to you as elected officials, right? Therefore, governing becomes personal. It's where if there are empty storefronts, or there is homelessness, or there is a layoff at one of the factories outside of town, you see it up close and personal. You see it with the people that you live next to and see on Main Street, or see at a school ball game or wherever. You see that up close and personal, and that makes it harder for you as city leaders. Your decisions affect your constituents more directly than just about any form of government there is. So you have to get it right for the people you know, for the businesses you frequent, and the decisions that you make will affect them for good or for ill. So that's a lot of pressure on a city government. And it becomes personal when global events affect you locally. COVID-19 is probably the most direct example, but economic downturns and civic unrest and addiction and all of those things that are happening all over the country and the world affect you here drastically. And yet, you don't have great big huge buckets of money to pour at those problems to solve them. And you have to compete with all of the other cities and towns across the country to get those transformational dollar resources to fix whatever ill that might be happening, whether it's you need a new industrial park, or you need to address addiction issues, or you need to engage in COVID response, those kinds of things. So that's just to say that your job is really hard, and I recognize that, and it's kind of the framework that I thought it would be good to start our discussion today. Did I get that about right, or am I saying all this and you go, no, this is too easy? Any comments about that? Anything I'm missing out on in the way that you have to govern here in Danville?
The only thing I would add is that by law, we have to balance our budget every year.
Good point.
I don't know if you brought that up. I don't think you did.
Didn't mention that, but you're right, yeah.
Makes it
And
difficult.
our federal government, as we know from recent discussions nationally, doesn't have to, right? So I know each of you has your own vision about this work. And I don't know what your political leanings are, and I don't care. I don't think it matters at all, because you have...
This is nonpartisan.
Right, exactly. You have to govern the way you have to govern. But you can have, through your actions, such an important collective impact on the citizens of Danville that your job becomes even more important. So if we think about the work that you do as leading toward making and keeping Danville a successful and thriving city, then your work becomes even more critical and more important. Is that a goal that we can all agree on, that that's what you want to, that's what you're here for for the most part? I want you to think about, as we really get started today, how your work can impact the future health of this community. You know that. And the citizens, the businesses, the students, and any of the visitors, for that matter, that come and contribute to your local economy. And so as we put that as our kind of a framework around what we're going to talk about today, I want to back up a little bit and talk about the survey that you all took. Thank you very much for taking that survey, too. And I know it was something else to fit into your day.
Or you want to give her a hand?
I get it. It's a little flimsier than I expected it was. But the survey that you all took, the first question was, how do you rate the workings of the commission? You all gave yourself, and this was not just the Board of Commissioners who took the survey, but also management staff. I don't know how many. We had 15 responses total, so I guess 10 management staff also took the survey. It was chief of police and HR and utilities person and I don't know, a bunch of other people like that. But you gave yourself, in the overall effectiveness of city government, a 7.2 out of 10, which is pretty good, but it's not great. It could be a lot better, I think. And that first set of questions was all the scales questions, a scale of 1 out of 5, with 5 being the best and 1 being the lowest, if you recall. And those questions were based loosely on Patrick Lencioni's work, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Now, you may have read that back in the day sometime, or you may have heard about it. But what he really, rather than dysfunction, he really talks about the 5 behaviors of high-performing teams. And he does it in a way that he uses a pyramid as the way to discuss that. So if we draw Lencioni's pyramid, there are 5 behaviors, and I'm a terrible drawer. Ashley, I should have probably had you do this too. And he concludes that the 5 behaviors that are important for highly effective teams, it starts with trust. It moves on to conflict, and in his definition, that's actually healthy conflict. And I'm left-handed, so I'm standing in front of what I'm writing, and I'm smearing it all, and sorry about that. The middle part of the pyramid is commitment. Followed by accountability. And finally, results. So if your team trusts each other, engage in healthy conflict, are committed to their work, are accountable for their work, then the results will follow. And there will be a focus on results as well. Is that pretty clear? So in your survey, here's how you rated that. Not surprisingly, your highest response was commitment. Anybody who runs for elected office or who works for a city government is likely to be quite committed to the work that they do, right? Also not surprisingly, your lowest is conflict. And that's low because so many people are afraid of conflict. It's just uncomfortable. They don't like it. They don't like arguing. They don't like having disagreements. And the other ones come out. I'm sorry, I put 3.9. It's actually 3.8. Trust was 3.9. Okay. She didn't need to do that. Thank you. That's fine. Healthy conflict, 3.8. Trust was 3.9. Accountability was also 3.9. And results was another high mark of 4.2. So that's how you all rated yourselves in the survey.
Now, when you say yourselves, you're talking about management too, right?
Yes, okay. Yourselves as a city government.
I got you.
Right. I didn't break out just the commissioners' results, but I could later if Earl wants me to break that out that way. But I figured it would be good to just show the whole results. So any thoughts or questions or comments based on that?
Is that unusual? You said not surprisingly on a couple of them. Is that generally how?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head. I would have to look at and see what his go back to the book I read, a while back, and see what the typical group says. But this doesn't really surprise me. I think commitment is high. It's obvious that commitment is high. Several people marked it as 5, in fact. And results are high because you're proud of what you do and you have an emphasis on achieving results for your community, I think. That shows out obviously. I think we can work on trust and healthy conflict today, and I think that accountability comes a little bit from that. So speaking of trust, because it is so important to how a team, and I'll call you all a team. You've got your team that's here today, but also the greater team of city government. There are 4 elements of trust that the experts talk about, and those are competence, motive, means, and impact. Of course, every city government and every organization, for that matter, needs competent people who are capable of delivering services, who have the technical and technological know-how to do that effectively, and they have managerial smarts along the way. But course competence is never enough. People, especially citizens who have elected officials that we're dealing with, that we're talking about, want to understand their elected officials and their city government workers' motives and what motivates them and whose interests they are working toward as well, whose interests they serve. In the trust context means doesn't just refer to one actions, but refers also to the idea of whether that person takes a fair path toward getting there. So it's not just the actual action, but it's the fairness of that action that people pay attention to. So it includes demonstrating ethical practices and for both employees and city government elected officials, and honestly communicating with the public. 2 areas of means. And then impact, of course, is the overall effect of your work, how all that other goes together to have an impact on the citizens of Danville. Make sense? There's also another factor that's not on this list, but it is included in areas of trust, and that is the idea of legitimacy, whether people believe that the person is in that role legitimately, whether they're competent to perform their role as a city employee, or whether they are truly representing the interests of the citizens of Danville. Does that make sense? And you all see that legitimacy question, I guess, probably about every day when people say, you didn't vote the way I wanted you to, or why hadn't my pothole been fixed on my road, or something. You get that often, I'm sure. On the handouts, I gave everybody the results of the 10 questions that made up these generalizations. And I thought it would be a good idea for you to look briefly at those, maybe turn to your neighbor or have a discussion, since we're a pretty small group, have a discussion about anything in those results that surprised you, or think maybe that you or your colleagues are not necessarily in close alignment with one another based on what you would have put with that question and what the average was?
I'm surprised about the hidden agenda score. That one really kind of jumps out at me.
I was surprised about that too.
That's not something I detect, and maybe I'm just too naive or whatever, or not paying attention, but that one surprised me.
Yeah, I agree with you, that one.
Were these also across
Staff.
staff?
Staff and everybody. Yeah.
Okay. That kind of skews it for me a little.
Does it?
Because I guess
Yeah.
I thought just the 5 of us were answering some of these questions. Because we don't interact with staff a lot other than
Not in
city
this
manager.
Not in this form of government.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
that's
mainly Earl and Ashley, I'm sure.
No.
Right.
Now, we don't
Most
trust their
interactions.
agendas.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Mayor?
We don't trust their agendas.
So, yeah, I guess this, to me, is a little skewed because, and I thought that when I was answering it, I thought it was just 5 or maybe
The hidden
6
agen-
of us.
So,
It's a little alarming to me that trust and conflict are among the lowest. But is the conflict lower?
Those are the hardest to deal with.
Well,
Yeah.
You know
well,
what I mean, in all honesty, I mean, if you're gonna impact that in a positive way, it's really, you have to do a lot of work with trust to really maintain a high. Is that true?
well, I was gonna ask if conflict was low because maybe we don't feel like there's a lot of conflict. I mean, is that a question that's based on, is that based on the fact that we don't have a lot of conflict, but the conflict we have is fairly healthy? Does that make sense?
Yeah, outwardly, you all have a lot of public discussions, and then outwardly,
Right,
Does that make
right,
sense?
yeah.
Which is kind of what you're saying, is that right?
So
Yeah.
the two
Yeah.
questions that were put together to form the conflict summary were the sixth question the fifth question about working through conflicts and problems openly and effectively, and the ninth question, political considerations are put aside in the best interest of the city. So those responses were were what came up with that, with the conflict question. As far as the, what was the one that you said? Representative Caldwell, Commissioner Caldwell? Hidden agendas.
No
Hidden agendas.
Okay, so we had 3 commissioners who said, who ranked that number 3 out of 5, one that ranked it 2 out of 5, and one that ranked it 4.5 out of 5.
So our average is
Lower. Yeah, it would be lower on that one. So that gives you something to work on, right? Any other of the responses that puzzle you or trouble you or anything that I can clear up? And I will separately rank the commission responses and get those back to you after I get back to Erlanger today.
I think that would be interesting to know with staff and this size and the town this size, kind of all in this together, and staff included.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important that we know kind of what they're thinking and what they perceive to be, what their leadership is doing. So I can see.
Yeah, it's important for you all to have the trust of your city leaders, your employees, and it's important for them to trust you all. Or I may have said that wrong, but anyway, both ways. It should go both ways, obviously. So I'll break those out and rescore those. As they were coming in, I thought I should do that, and then when they came in, I didn't think about it again. So, as you know, though, besides these things, the survey was divided into both these ranking questions of the scale of 1 to 5 and several open-ended responses. So the open-ended responses, commission members and staff members alike were pretty united in what you all said in your open responses. Not everyone said all of these 9 things, but they were on more than not on somebody's survey. And those are, but overall, over and above everybody else, communication was the most common theme that was in all of the survey results across everybody. Other issues and needs and things that the city should be working on or needs to work on are the downtown master plan, parks and recreation plan, economic development, staffing that included, some people talked about compensation, others talked about retention, and others talked about recruitment, and some talked about all 3. COVID was obviously an important response. Your aging infrastructure, I don't know any city government that wouldn't have put that on one of their lists. Funding and good stewardship of that funding was mentioned by at least one of you. It was a commissioner who mentioned that one. Housing of all types, whether it's affordable, high-end apartments, condos, and that sort of thing.
Question.
Yes?
Now, you're going through them not as a ranking, just as a general.
Yeah, they're not
Consensus
in any
Okay.
particular order except communication
So on
is the first one.
Thank you for going there. So on communication, is that all communication? Is that external communication?
Yes.
With the city, is it internal
Yes,
communication?
yes,
All
yes,
the
and
above.
yes.
Okay.
It's all of those, right.
Are you going to give us these papers? Or a report later?
I am.
Oh, good. 'Cause I
Yeah,
liked that.
yeah.
Okay.
And I thought it would be interesting for all of us today together to rank those 9 things, because, that's a lot of things to concentrate on all at once. It's even a really, really good juggler could not possibly juggle 9 things at once. So I thought it might be an interesting thing to see how much you all, how important each of these is in the great scheme of things. So we're going to do a ranking exercise, and the colors mean nothing. So don't know, just because I gave you red, Mayor, doesn't mean that we're going to point you out. Let me find another red so that his don't get. Yep. Oh yeah. Ashley gets to play too. Should have had this out ready to go, shouldn't I? All right, if everybody would come up here and put your dots. You can't put them all on the same place. So there's answering that question. I want you to put your dots on the top 3.
Community needs or
Your needs.
What we,
What-
we consider to be the top priorities.
Top priorities for you as the Board of Commissioners in your role on behalf of the city at large. Yep. Don't everybody come up at once. Everybody do come up at
So we
once.
only have 3?
That's it.
Sorry.
I'm going to rip mine in half.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We will know if you did that,
That staffing thing, when do we do this? We did this.
When did we do that?
Yeah, when do we just do this survey, Russ?
Well, you got to keep in mind, it's not just compensation, it's
Oh, I know, I agree, yeah. That's
Yeah.
right.
quality.
Well, I think people are responding to, are you all losing, for example, police officers because of pay? So I think that was,
One out right
No, that's just me, I just was trying to think about.
now? Oh, okay.
I knew what one was gonna be.
Oh.
I know what two was gonna be. I should put the word affordable on that one.
I'm with you, Commissioner. You can't do that.
Really, a lot of problems are not real ones, because there was just like communication.
Right,
You know?
maybe.
And once people are communicated with, it's like, oh, there really wasn't a problem.
That's true.
Blow
Can I put it
up
on the
because of the-
No. Play by the rules.
I don't like to play by the rules. I like to spin the rules.
You like to make up the new rules, right?
No, I'm still thinking.
That wasn't defined in the people that put that down, but I would think that roads and bridges and community facilities, I don't know, how up to date like your fire department is, or your police department is, or your public works, utilities. Utilities is a common thing for city governments to worry about, the grid, as they say.
I want both, but I don't think communicated with.
You're not allowed to put it on the line, I already asked.
No.
Yeah, I really tried, but I thought that one had.
Yeah, I know, mine was too. We need 4 dots.
And that was my first thought, so.
What was that?
Oh, no, that I'm doing musical chairs with
She moved her dots.
With your dots, I started to do that a minute ago.
Ashley, did you play? Okay.
I ripped one, but I put it back together.
I must have been looking over this way when you came up. Okay. All right. So your top two are economic development and staffing. Would anybody disagree that those are two of your very important tasks? And the third one is tied in Parks and Recreation and communication. Does that surprise anybody?
Parks and Rec surprises me a little.
Yeah, me too. I would have guessed master plan, downtown master plan.
Well, she said it surprised me what way they get enough votes, so she got more.
And maybe the downtown master plan is because we just completed.
Okay, so you're good there.
Now it's execution time.
Well, yeah, we haven't completed it, we're just now starting to execute.
You've got the plan, you haven't got the execution part.
That's right.
Right.
Well, you say the same thing about the,
Parks and Rec.
Which, to me, the master plan is economic development, so that's the same thing.
They kind of go hand in hand, you're right. Earl and Ashley, if you were going to speak for your city leadership staff, would they agree with those 3 or 4?
Yeah, so here's the thing, economic development matters, that's what our job is to foster an environment around which businesses can thrive, and our citizens thrive. So for me, that's, and I think staff, the other side of the staff, the reason staff jumps up to me is because if we do good with staff, then all those other things become more effective or more easily addressed.
Yeah, that whole results thing here
Right. So to
is
me, that's
easier to
why-
address.
For me, that's why staffing is immediately something I put my dot on, just because of that purpose.
And I did too, because if we have the right people in the key positions, then the communication and the economic development and those types of things kind of fall in
Right.
place.
The right people in key positions and the wrong people out of those positions.
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a,
I don't care what the person's right or wrong, I do, but the funding, to me, helps ensure I get the right person. I have more options about getting the right person.
right. And, economic development has an impact on your funding so that you can afford getting the right person, has an impact on your Parks and Recreation Department and your downtown, the quality of life downtown.
So I put my 3 dots on economic development, and I'm left brain dominant, I know. Economic development, infrastructure, and finances. Because to follow up on JH's thought, if you've got good economic development, and infrastructure is part of that, and good economic development produces the finances, then we all know that you gotta pay for talent, staffing, and we all know that all these other things, and communication is important. I don't disagree at all. In fact, Earl will tell you, I beat up on him long enough
Well, that's
about
why
the
we're here to
communication.
Yeah.
But that's, I'm just explaining myself. I'm not asking anybody to agree with it. I'm just explaining, my logic on it. Maybe that helps people understand if I have an agenda, then I'm gonna say it's not an agenda. I'm gonna say it's just my focus.
But if we don't have good and clear and honest communication, we don't get any of those things done.
But the and let's debate that a minute. Because
Okay.
the communication, some of this, the communication, you get communication internally and externally. And a lot of economic development, which we're trying to change, is communication with others outside of the city. And that has been difficult at best for a number of years. And I think the communication internally is largely up to staff, I think. Because if we say, we want the streets painted pink, and the commission majority votes that way, then it's kind of up to Earl to execute. And how you
Yeah, but
communicate
if there is one commissioner say, that wants to paint the street pink, and all the other commissioners don't really want that, but it's not that important to them. They'll just stay quiet. But then once the street is pink, everybody will be fussing about that. So yes, in city government, you have to pick your battles and what's important to you to make a stand on, and what's important is not important enough to really, I don't know, use your political capital, as it were.
Let me share with you that one of the more proud aspects that I have of serving on the city commission is we can disagree, and sometimes it's you know, in private it may be a little bit testy, and in public it might be just a tad bit testy. But when the vote's taken, it's over. You move on, and as far as I can tell, nobody drags around any hard feelings. I mean, it's, you know, you put your best out there, and it's a majority rules.
Mm-hmm. And you think pretty much that's the way it works?
I agree with the mayor. I want to just say you have to be real careful about when you say it. Point in case Black River, I put my foot in my mouth. I said something about we had made a decision about salaries, and the staff sure complained about wanting more salary. And I said, oh, by the way, guys, you know, we discussed, debated that thing. And once we voted on it, it was out of my mind. I didn't work back to it anymore.
Oops.
It came out the wrong way.
Right. Nobody knew you. Everybody knew you didn't mean it that way, but
I ended up talking to chief of police and going to the shift meeting and wrote a letter to the editor and everything else to verify that. You know. It's just like, you know, I don't want to lose a lot of sleep over decisions that have been made, you know.
Yeah.
They come out right. So we got to be careful about how we.
Right. Everybody's experienced foot and mouth disease at one point in time, haven't they?
The mayor's comment about infrastructure and finances, I put my vote for those two up in economic development, because I only had three. If I had tags to vote on, I would probably put something down in infrastructure.
Yeah, I know. I made you focus in on three. I apologize for that.
My choices were influenced by what I hear from what the people. They're not necessarily, maybe not my three, but they're the three that I hear the most about, and therefore I feel like I ought to represent them.
That's a really solid way of making your decision. Absolutely. So you were talking about once a decision made, majority rule. Here's what the commissioners stated, and that basically that's number 10 question on that scales list, basically. Once decisions are made, commission members publicly support the decision or do not publicly criticize it. You all ranked that pretty high. 3 of you gave it a 4, 1 of you gave it a 5, and 1 of you gave it a 3. So you all believe that pretty strongly. And in fact, nobody ranked that 3 was the lowest ranking. It got, by that score alone, got 4.3. So it got almost as high as any of the category scores. So just an FYI. So we're going to return to these things later. We're not done with them. But I want to go over, because you're a board of commissioners, I want to go over some responsibilities that boards of all types have, just so we're clear and get that out in the open and get it out of the way, all right? And so we're going to talk about your fiduciary duties, say that 3 times real fast, and Danville's specific code of ethics. So fiduciary duties, for your review from your college class, whatever, or your high school class, whenever you talked about that, are these 3, the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. The duty of care is the one that says that you act in the best interest, in good faith, you show care like a prudent person acting in similar situations would show. that you work for the best interests of the city and its citizens, and that your policies that you enact behave in a way that safeguard resources, that finances and stewardship thing that was mentioned, and reduce risks. You're all about risk reduction and risk management, of course, and that facilitates effective government, making good decisions that you can stand behind. After the duty of care, the duty of loyalty includes city commissioners and staff, and this applies to staff as well, obviously, are obligated to exercise an undivided loyalty to the city. And that includes disclosing any and all conflicts of interest that may be present, and you disclose those before they become an issue. When you think they may be, you disclose them then, not, of course, when you get caught. That's pretty obvious. We've all seen those headlines from other cities that have strayed, or city government leaders that have strayed, and you don't want that to happen. And then there's the duty of obedience. Commissioners and staff are obligated to address the needs of the city, to be faithful to its purposes, and act in conformity with all laws affecting city government. And being vigilant to see that city funds are used appropriately, lawfully, and in ways that garner public trust, that do not give preference to one group over another.
Go back to loyalty, the third bullet, Wayne Jackson.
Never use elected office for personal gain. So if you have to think about the needs of the city, not your own personal needs. Now, your own personal needs may be met because the needs of the city are the same, or the interests of the city are same, but if, for example, this would be an Earl example more than you all, but if you're negotiating your health insurance premiums for the upcoming year, and you have, and I have no idea what Earl's family's like, so let me just make pretend that he's got a bunch of kids and a wife, and he's responsible for the health insurance for his family. And so he looks at the plan and looks at the way that it's going to be divided up between single coverage and family coverage, and he tilts it so that family coverage is treated more fairly for him than for Ashley, who doesn't have any kids or husband, or is not responsible for her health care, for example. So that's a real specific example of personal interest. Or if you all are looking at repaving this road versus this road, and your business is on this road, or your house, or whatever, but really this road needs it more, and you vote for this one, is that personal gain? Maybe, maybe not, but I would say it would be.
Disclose it.
It would be, people would talk, and people would.
I think we've had that in the recent past, but I think Earl has taken care of that.
Good.
By the compensation study.
Our form of government also helps to eliminate that. Because,
You think?
yeah, staff is mostly making decisions and recommendations to us. So we're not directly supervising staff.
Right.
And
right.
directly supervising the road crews. I wanted to ask about avoid, I understand avoid tainting the deliberations, but I don't understand why we would avoid casting the deciding vote.
If you have a conflict of interest,
Oh, a conflict of interest, okay.
yeah. If you have a conflict
Okay,
of
yeah.
interest.
That did, yeah, that did,
Yeah.
I didn't read it like that. I was like, why would we do that?
I still didn't get to what I wanted about that personal gain thing. Let me try to create an example right quick. I'm a city commissioner.
Can you use your microphone, please? I can't hear you. Or can you speak up?
I'll try speaking up. Let me use my teacher voice from last night. I'm on the city commission. know that, would that be an example of using it for personal gain? Not money going into my campaign fund, it's going into my pocket.
Could be perceived.
I would say that might be a personal gain. I mean, it's a gray area.
Are you there as a commissioner or are you there as a teacher?
You wouldn't want that, you wouldn't want your, you wouldn't want, in a political campaign, you wouldn't want the other person
Right.
knowing that.
Right. And I wouldn't, as a, I don't know, as a what, but if I knew that and I did that, then I would be violating, I think, of real estate, I think. And I'm just trying to figure out, well, here's the thing. It's easy for me because I don't charge,
Yeah.
okay? But I know there's some folks out there who charge for everything you do.
Sure, sure.
And if the price is the same for A, B, and C, then I don't think it's an issue. But if A gets this and B gets this, and then I get C, and Mr. gets something a little different, I'm wondering if that's about, is that personal gain?
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, it comes down to, are they paying you to show up to teach, or are they paying you to show up as a commissioner?
Or buying your vote
What hat
as a
are-
commissioner.
yeah.
That's that gray area where they're not saying they're buying your vote.
But the perception is.
In this environment, yeah, perception.
The perception is. And the other thing on that specific issue, I would think that the smart thing to do would be say, that's really generous of you, but I can't accept an additional fee. But if you want to donate that to a cause that is important to me, whatever, that would be.
There's an issue, but there's an issue right down the street that I'm aware of. And is there, for example, a financial amount, a monetary amount in my mind that I should encourage folks, if you're doing something, somebody won't give you an honorarium, the honorarium should not exceed X amount of money. Is there any kind of
We have that in our,
Yeah, we're going to go over that next, actually.
I thought it was 250, but,
yeah, something given number?
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember reading that.
Mr. Atkins, which down the street are you talking about?
I want to know how you're getting paid to show up. I want to do that.
I want that job. Well, when you have questions like that, and there's so many gray areas, we know that there are. But there are things that benefit the city, but also benefit you. Do you bring those up? Is that a conflict of interest? When you have questions like that, your best resource is your city manager and your city attorney. Both of those can give you important guidance to help you work through those conflict of interest and those fiduciary duty kinds of questions. Does that sound good? Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So besides, these are general fiduciary duties. They are in state law. Just about every state has fiduciary duties within their corporate and nonprofit and government law. And they're in best practices and just about everything else. So that's general duty. But then Danville, you have your own code of ethics. Every city in the state of Kentucky has to pass an ordinance that's a code of ethics. And you passed yours, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in 1995. Does that sound about right? Those of you who've been around for a while? And this is what they all include. And Commissioner Atkins, if you will look down at the bottom of that list, there's something called honoraria. So let me see what the honoraria says. No officer or employee of the city or a city agency shall accept any compensation, honorarium, or gift with a fair market value greater than $250 in consideration of an appearance, speech, or article unless the apparent speech or article is both related to the officer's or employee's activities outside of municipal service and is unrelated to the officer's or employee's service within the city.
So post-employment restriction, that's post-employment restriction with the city?
Yes.
But as a retired educator, since that's a part of my professional career,
That's employment, he's talking about employment.
yeah, I mean, that would.
No, that's not
That's not
your employment, it's as a city officer's employment. So no officer or employee of the city or any city agency shall appear or practice before the city or any city agency with respect to any matter on which the officer or employee personally worked while in the service of the city. So if the utilities, the head of utilities, left and started working for a lobbying firm and came back and presented about utility rates, that would be in violation of the code. That,
Yeah, that's an example, but two, it's slanted towards to prevent you from cooking an RFP type document and leaving, coming back and putting yourself in a position to give that work.
Like they do in Washington all the time?
So the
Or giving
foundation
things to your
idea is
family
prevent
members.
that.
yeah, that's a really good
Like they
point.
do.
Yeah. Does that make
Mine
sense?
for two.
Any other items on that list that you want to call out?
Receipt of gifts.
Receiving gifts, is that one?
Receipt of gifts, is that it?
I think it's $100.
$250.
So, so have you been offered a lot of, I mean, I don't know why we're talking about this.
People, Commissioner.
I try to be very vague. I run the hamburger joint, and I'm a city employee. I'm a city commissioner. And so I've done a catering thing for Joe out there. And Joe gives me a tip that's about 50% of the bill that, the catering bill is paid, but I get a tip about 50% of the catering bill.
That, what do you think, Earl?
The ethics ordinance contemplates avoiding the appearance.
Appearance, perception.
Right, and so the responsibility is to avoid the idea that there's a conflict. So, for example, the one that we had was when the commissioner donated these shades. Although the spirit was correct, and the effort was to truly provide a benefit to the city because we didn't include that in our base bid, it was wrong because the perception was, well, it could become publicly known and you're just trying to advertise for yourself. That was the opposition.
It cost them a reelection too.
The opposition took that tack with that donation, although unless I said that, no one would ever know, right? But at the core of it, it's the appearance of it, which is why that was really sustained by the letter or reprimand or whatever happened in that case.
Yep.
Although the intent, I believe, was still fair and honest and was just trying to do good that.
Right,
I would defend that, but it's that appearance that gets you.
absolutely, absolutely. I know it's been a while since you've read the code of, your code of ethics, and it's pages and pages, a little bitty tiny type. And I printed it out just for this purpose so that we could refer to it if we needed to. But the introduction to the code of ethics is really pretty inspiring as an introduction and a purpose behind that code. And so I had Ashley put it on the back of your agenda, and I've asked Ashley if she wouldn't mind reading it to us all so that we can follow along. You gonna do it?
Stuff all the time.
This is an excerpt from the Danville Code of Ethics. There is no higher honor and privilege than government service. The guiding principle of the ethics guidelines is simply to know right from wrong, to act in accordance with what is right, and to avoid even the appearance of what is wrong. Our duty as public servants is to always serve in the public's best interest and share the conviction that we must do so only for the right reasons. It is the collective, individual actions of every member of this organization that will dictate whether the city is considered ethical. This evaluation will be based on the extent that our actions improve the community, the public interest, rather than serve personal interest and gain. Each of us is the organization called Danville City Government in these actions and decisions we make every day. There must be full confidence and trust in our ability to do the right things for the citizens of the city. Each officer and employee has a responsibility to the organization and our colleagues to demonstrate the highest standards of personal integrity, honesty, and fortitude in all public activities. It is in this way that we can inspire public confidence and trust in city government.
Wow, that was good. That hooked on Fox is really doing it for you there.
It's better than my efficacy comment the other day.
Evelyn Wood speed reading course.
I commend you, or the people who wrote that in 1995, for figuring out a way to use the word fortitude in a sentence. I've always wanted to do that, right? But I've never figured out a way to use that in a sentence. So don't you think that's inspiring? I just think it really does stay to the commissioners and the employees how important your job is and what an honor it is. So I thought it would be a good idea to call that out. And I want to call out one other thing, too, that I kind of skipped over in my notes. James Madison, who, of course, was our 4th president and one of our founders, always said that legislative bodies, like yours, have the unique ability to pass private interests through the medium of a chosen body of citizens. That's the way elected government works, right? Or can work. So that's why the process that you all go through of deliberation and discussion is so important to help remove that private interest from public law. Now, am I naive enough to think that you can totally remove that private interest? Probably not in most situations. But through deliberation and through your honest appraisal of what's good for the cities of Danville, you can reduce that conflict, if you want to call it that, of interest more readily. Does that make sense? So we got the ethics thing out of the way. We got that cleared up. Check. Done. Right? No ethics violations here. So we're going to talk briefly about the roles and functions of you all as the Board of Commissioners and a few key positions within city government. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I did want to kind of lay it out in case there was a question anybody wanted to raise. You know that there are 3 forms of government in the, what's it called, the home rule class of cities. There's the mayor commission plan, there's the commission plan, and then there's the city manager plan. And of course, you all adopted, hi, welcome. You all adopted the city manager plan quite some time ago. And by the way, you probably know this too, but it cannot be changed except by vote of the citizens. So you're stuck with him as long as the citizens, until the citizens vote. So this is...
Wait, back up just a minute.
All right. No, you're not stuck with him, but you're stuck with the city manager, just not that one.
No, we have one duty officially, hire and fire city manager.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're not stuck with it.
And supervisor.
Well, this is true. You're stuck with a
Just
city
letting you know
manager,
where-
I should say. But why would you change now? I mean, look at him.
We got a list of people that
Yeah, really. We've been through enough city managers.
So we're going to go over some staff roles and commissioner roles. And so this is your city manager form of government. You've probably seen this 120 times, probably this week, but it's on your website and everything. Voters, then the commissioner, board of commissioners, and then all the city manager, and then all the individual departments. So pretty cut and dry. So together, the mayor and the commissioners and the city employees make up the team that is city government for Danville, right? And that team is responsible for Danville's success as a city. And I know political interests and differences exist in any organization, and I know you're not partisan and try to put that behind you, but it does exist. So sometimes it makes people have a hard time thinking of city government as a team, but in fact it is. And if your interest is making and keeping Danville the best city it can possibly be, then that becomes even a greater challenge and more important of a challenge to achieve. Great teams respect one another even when they disagree. Know how to advocate for what they believe in without making it personal. Develop mutual trust and openness and respect for each other. And pay attention to cultural differences in that respect. It also means giving space for those of you, I don't think any of you in this room apply to this, but those introverts in the room to express their opinions and ideas. I had an employee in a past life who was the most introverted introvert I've ever known as in a professional situation, and she also had the very best ideas in my organization. And it was really hard for me, wanting to talk all the time, to allow some silence to give her the time to speak up, and she almost always had the right answer, almost always. So it was a learning lesson for me. So how do you propose to work together? And we talked about communication being one of your top 3 or 4 choices. You talk to each other. That's how you learn to trust each other. You talk to each other before meetings and after meetings, and you talk with each other and converse during meetings, and you call people on the phone, and you text them, and you email them, and you talk about not just city business maybe, but how's the family, where are you going on vacation, what about that game last night, UK gonna beat Georgia, yes. And you get to know people on a personal basis. That's how you communicate and build trust. You also build trust by being consistent, by being willing to listen to other opinions, and even change your mind when you get new information, new facts are brought to bear. And one timeless piece of advice I want to add to that is criticize in private, compliment in public. And I would say that public praise should be both sincere and very frequent. When it's sincere, tell people. And then so the last bullet on that slide, stay in your lane. We've said it several times that you've got one main job, and that is to hire the city manager who's supposed to do everything else. So learn to stay in that lane. You know you have all kinds of expertise, but your job is to govern. Your job is to call for strategy and overall needs of the city, like these, but not get involved in the weeds and the operations. Somebody referred to it as nose in, but fingers out. So keep your fingers out, but keep your nose in so that you know what's going on in the city. Make sense? And for city staff, you also should know your own unique role as well. So you should know that you're not here to govern, that's the 5 of commissioner's role, but you're here to do the job of running the city.
Can I follow up on what you just said?
Yes, please.
Nose in, fingers and hands out. Earl, I want your input on this, and I think you and I talked about it once or twice, but it's been expressed to me, and frankly, I agree with it, that it would be helpful to us to, from time to time, to be able to attend a city management meeting. Not speak, but observe. Earl, I don't know how you feel about it, and if now's your time to say, I got a problem with it. But that helps us to hear conversation, hear issues, hear obstacles. Now, that's one person's opinion here.
The only thing caveat is when you're looking at organizational behavior, you gotta look at what you're communicating, whether or not you're intending to communicate that or not. And your presence sometimes can send a message that you're not intending to. While you're there for a specific purpose, some other people may feel like you're there for an alternative purpose.
And
So that's just the one
yeah.
negative caveat to that you have to consider. But, other than that, that's the core of it. And then to what extent are you defending or impacting other commissioners? And so like one of the things as a counter to that some cities do is have one meeting where they're just conducting business of the city and they're really interacting more heavily with staff as a board, and then another meeting where they're interacting. So the second meeting of the month, maybe pay bills and then really interact with the public activities. All of our meetings really tailored the same, so that staff is at every meeting, have this chance to interact at so we're not intentional about creating that opportunity with regular meetings, right? So what you don't want then too, when you're talking about trust is, again, from an organizational behavior standpoint, you don't want one commissioner consistently doing something, and then the other commissioners have an expectation of a leadership style, and that creates conflict, right? So that's complicated. It's not necessarily wrong, but there's a lot of layers to that onion.
Yeah, it would need to be very carefully thought out and designed so that, number one, when you're in a city employees team meeting, that they're not holding back on what they need to discuss because, we can't talk about that because the commissioner's in the room or the mayor's here. So it would limit honest discussion, or it would send a message of, they don't trust me, or it would send a message of, we're in trouble.
Or it could send a message that
I care.
that we're all on a team.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think building that trust first across the whole city government would need a lot of work too.
Just to be
And
clear,
be well designed.
I don't particularly have the time nor the desire to do it, but others may.
Yeah. I get it.
Could we put out the fact that the commission is willing to do that? And that staff through the city manager could request our presence, not a majority of us, but our presence just to brainstorm a particular issue?
Yeah.
For example, it would be really neat to hear some staffing people discuss the need for a new pay scale that we just recently put in place, a new position that we put in place. We get stuff in writing to read, but to read, I'm that introvert in drag. So I need that quiet time, but I also need that time where I like to hear people say, talk about, give their opinion about stuff. And that's what we miss sometimes.
Yeah.
So as an
And
introvert,
that,
that's
and
very
Yeah,
great.
in a public meeting, that's always a challenge.
I wouldn't want to do
Right.
it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
always hard
Yeah.
for staff to effectively communicate at a meeting. And, a few people used to make fun of me for talking a lot. But, which I can do.
We
but
still
I can
do.
I can also not. But like, the point with that is that there was a point in time where I outwardly decided and outwardly understood that everybody needs to know what I'm thinking if we're trying to talk to the commission about a decision. So I started over-communicating intentionally to make sure that everybody knew what my decision drivers were internally. That was why that resulted in the recommendation that I had, right? And it's hard to do for staff publicly sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, the conversation and the dynamics of tossing things around in a management team meeting are very different than, okay, this is what we decided, now who's gonna go to the commission with it? That's a very different thing that
Yeah.
most people don't want to do.
I'll give you an example. Chief Gray and I have had a number of conversations over probably the last 4 years where he has shared with me, here's our problem. And when I have shared that with previous city manager, in one ear and out the other, would you agree with that? Because I know you did the same. But if that information from the chief had been conveyed to all of us, perhaps we would have been able to convey that to the city manager at the time to say, this is a real problem, and we want it fixed.
So for me, you've got to acknowledge sometimes when you don't have somebody listening, including me, right? I mean, it's just the truth. Sometimes you have to tell the city manager. But for me, now I will say this, and it sounds like I'm talking about myself all the time. I'm not intending that, right? So it's not about me, but I'm comfortable in my own skin in that I'm good with who I am as an individual. So if you, as the mayor, need to call the police chief, fire chief, utility director, city engineer, that's normal to me. That doesn't offend me, right? In this position, you can end up with a lot of people that aren't comfortable with that. There's nothing wrong with that because you're a board of commissioners, and a board of an organization should have a relationship with more than one person.
Right,
Right.
and that's, and
But
to,
now that's the limit of it, because then once you go deeper than
Right.
that,
Right.
you really
You're
start
getting your
to
fingers in there.
erode
Yeah.
that confidence.
and the other side of that is previous city managers have built the culture of employees are not allowed to talk to us.
Right.
And I feel like, I know the four of us that have been here several years now, we've tried to cultivate communication as long as we don't give them direct
There's nothing wrong with.
direction or supervision. We can call and ask them questions. They can call and ask us questions.
That's
But
noses
that-
in.
But that culture of the fear has been built here by previous city managers. And I really think you've helped that, Earl. And, I've had employees call me and say, oh, please don't tell anybody I called and told you this. And I always say, well, you're allowed to call and tell me things. I just can't tell you what to do, or, I can pass it on. So that's another cultural thing that's been built here that I have been trying to help, and I feel like others have too. But the thing I wanted to talk about was the communication between the five of us is the last basically 2 years, because of COVID, we've not had the opportunity. Normally, we would have opportunities at least a couple of times a year to go to a conference, and that, we're able
You're
to,
building rapport. in that
yes,
way.
we're able to build rapport through that. And going to, different events, that's all been very limited in the last few
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
I feel like that has limited our
Absolutely.
rapport
Yeah.
over the last
So,
18
and
months.
that's a
Besides the
situation-
fact that we had a traumatic experience last year outside of COVID. And now we have a new commissioner and a city manager, not a new person, but in a new position in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't really
The
talk,
been
I don't
going
really,
through-
Building is important.
Yeah.
Because what you learn subtly when you're building rapport is that, okay, I know that Ms. Jenny, Commissioner Holland requires different information to make a decision than you do.
right.
her, I have to provide different information than you. Well, when you see that information being provided in one way, that can be offensive to, or somehow odd to you, and make it look like one person or the other is, so building a rapport prevents that confusion sometimes, and helps each other understand that when you're talking to somebody, to Mr. Atkins is talking to Kevin, Mr. Atkins, you have to share certain information with Kevin if you are gonna debate on your own a topic, right? Like, you can't just assume that he communicates the same way you do. To your point, without that rapport building or continuation of that rapport development, then that does hinder you.
Yeah.
And hurt you, and
Yeah.
that can be impactful.
And I don't,
We're
I don't,
gonna, we're
I
gonna
don't
talk about that a
to-
little bit more.
I don't talk
but-
to other commissioners very much. I don't hear from them, and I don't, I mean, part of that's on me if I don't reach out, but I don't feel like, I don't know how much everyone else talks to each other, but I don't talk to anyone besides the mayor a lot.
Right, right. And so there's a lot of ways that you're gonna have to, go around the things that you used to do, or maybe someday will again, like go to common meetings and learn together at state functions and things. So figure out another way to build that rapport that doesn't include, being up in people's faces.
A lot of the text messaging that goes on, to me, I see that as good information, good input. Correct. Normally I don't respond back to it or give my opinion, whatever. Sometimes I want to say, before I type it, I don't do that either. But as far as, comments with other commissioners, I think we have an ability to communicate and express our positions on stuff without trying to force the other person to say they have the same position. I think it's just good information, good dialogue. I might know how Carter feels on something, I know how Cherry feels on something,
Yeah.
but I don't feel that they communicate that. They're trying to force me to say, take the same position.
Right,
No,
right.
and I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, I don't have a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, I'm not saying what anybody's trying to say.
Well, it sounds like that's something to work on as a commission, especially since you've undergone apparently some somewhat traumatic things in the past, not to mention COVID. So that sounds like something that needs some work. And we're going to talk a little bit more about having discussions that are civil and effective here in a bit. Going to go over these commission roles real quick, and unless you think that this would be a good time to take a quick break.
I want to say one last thing.
Okay.
As a commissioner, from former city managers, I have been told point blank directly not to communicate with the administrative staff. I oftentimes question that, and question things apply. So it's refreshing now to think that we're coming into a climate in the city where administrative staff members can share knowledge with us without being threatened by, quote unquote, their superiors, which is the city manager with us.
So it sounds like it's a major sea change
It is.
lately.
It
That's
is.
good.
It is.
Think?
And I always put this little caveat out there. If that's the truth for all of the administrators,
Yeah, it should be.
Should be.
but I put that up there. So they
Well-
need to have that message as well, that it's okay with them, for them as well.
Right, right.
So we
And
all-
some are going to be,
Yeah.
I guess, traumatized by past experiences and
Oh, yeah.
won't feel comfortable talking back and forth. So that's going to be a process. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen maybe this year. So maybe this staffing thing is more than just benefits and retention and yeah.
So how would you recommend that communication between administrative staff and them take place?
Well, I would think Earl would be the conduit, but also the culture setter more than the conduit. So, he could provide guidance to the rest of city staff about what is a productive relationship between staff and commissioners. Right? Right, Earl? Is that fair?
See, if you go through Earl, you're back to where we were. And what
Well-
Earl's saying, I think, what you're saying is, pick up the phone. Got 5 sets of ears here, what,
Yeah.
I was told I can't talk to people, but,
Well,
you know,
You know, you keep in mind. and
but
one-
don't tell them what to do.
Well,
You can ask
one of,
questions.
you
They're just
definitely
listening.
don't tell them what to do, because that's gonna create,
But I was
Yeah.
actually told
Correct.
don't talk to people.
that, so what you gotta, the caution is that keep in mind, so when I was I always go back to careers just because it's fun, and it was a good organizational study. But when Rex Greer walked in the room, you changed what you were doing. If you were not doing what his expectation were, you immediately grabbed something and did what you knew his expectation was. And I have gotten in immediate trouble before when I was a very young kid for not having that expectation be met prior to him walking in the room, right? But so like you have to, so that's a subtle, that's the positional authority that you have. There's 5 different types of authorities that you have. One of them is just your position, right? So you gotta watch the intimidation factor as an effective manager. If you wanna be an effective manager, you gotta watch utilizing each one of those inappropriately, unintentionally. So like if you put unintentional pressure on somebody by your presence, that can be a very negative thing organizationally. So you gotta manage that. You gotta have a good judgment on how to handle that. So it's not just not talking. So that's why when I'm saying that the logical stopping point for communication is, and it's easy for me to name Randy and Chief Gray and Fire Chief. I would be very careful. Using good judgment is limiting that yourself to those individuals. And the reason I say that is because once you get down below them, you're creating a negative pressure on them. You have disparate power, perception, right? So, there's a limit to how far you can do that if you're reaching it. So if you have a question about the fire that happened this weekend, and Earl's in Cincinnati at the football game, and you want an update beyond the text that I give you, then there's nothing wrong with you calling the police chief and just checking in and say, hey, Earl made us aware of this. Is everything okay? Was there really anything bad? That's totally reasonable. Calling the chief and saying, hey, now what I want you to do is make sure that you call
Right.
Mike Wilder and got Mike involved because I don't want to make Mike mad. That's probably too far, right? So you all have to use good judgment in that and understand all of our places. Does that make sense? Is that right?
And I have called, police chief and said, I just have a question. There was no reason for me to ask that to the city manager. And Earl, when you were engineer, I called and asked you questions. Or I would call and say, hey, somebody reported a pothole here, and just pass along information. So passing along information and just asking questions. I mean, I had, when we had our finance director, I had called and asked some questions to them as well. So calling and asking questions, or them calling us with questions or concerns is okay, because you know what? Our staff, they're also citizens and taxpayers. But I have gotten phone calls, and they have said, please don't tell anyone that I called you. I'm afraid I will lose my job. We've been told not to talk to you. And I always try to say, well, that's not true. You're allowed to call us with questions or concerns. So I think that has changed some, but also, like you said, we really shouldn't go past upper management
There's a
to
layer
ask those
there
questions.
that you just, seems conflicted when it happens.
Right.
And it's that perception rather than a reality. I mean, your intention might be good just because some employee has information.
Right.
Right. But I'd still encourage you to manage
power that you have effectively by keeping it in that lane. You know, the whistleblower concept is different altogether. So if somebody's calling you whistleblowing, they shouldn't,
Right.
right? Like that's
Right.
an issue.
Right.
And so then I think our ethics ordinance and our own standards, moral standards, should guide you in how to handle that situation. Exceptional to organizational chart stuff.
And I think the other thing is that what we're talking about should put limits on our communications with other staff and the city manager. That if the chief is some new information for very purpose for the commission to know, I rely on you guys to ensure that we don't call the chief. A lot of times that's what happens to that. Through a text or whatever, he will always send out information about something. Just like you send out one of the Sunday about the incident, and it's about the rumors that I can see that's what it did, and I'm calling them. So I think we gotta be real careful of that. It's not gonna be an everyday situation where the chief and I have a conversation. And it's about.
You got to be real careful about text messages too,
Oh, we are taking-
because you can't do city business via text. City of Cincinnati just got into some big trouble with that recently.
We've been real good about putting FY.
Yeah, more FY, right,
Yeah,
right,
Not about anybody trying to get me to vote on anything.
right.
And it's
That's
not-
what
it's
city
not
manager,
totally
the city
that.
government was doing in Cincinnati, yeah.
And we don't do anybody's evaluation of text message or the phone or whatever. And so it's just been good information and.
Yeah, as long as it's information sharing, you're good. And you're not making city decisions that way. Because you got to have that, like we're doing right now, is in public. So we said we were going to meet for 2 hours, so we got a half hour left. We can go over some roles and things, or we can take a deeper dive into this. What's your pleasure?
How about I offer a suggestion that we move to item 4?
Well, I've lost my agenda now. What is item 4?
Working together. A, high-performing teams. B, managing conflict. C, alignment. D, effective meetings.
All right.
That's just me. I don't know how everybody else feels.
Okay. So as a high-performing team, you know that these are your duties as the Board of Commissioners. Anything that surprises you there? Or shouldn't be there? Or is missing?
Number 3 is very, very powerful. We just have a hard time getting our citizens to understand that.
Yeah, true. All right. So here is Earl's job description, more or less. Anything I'm missing, Earl? Anything confusing to anybody there? Okay. What'd you say?
I'm not saying I know them all, but I'm trying. I know I speak sometimes. I can't say in good faith that I follow all of them. I might roll a stop sign.
Well, you're back to the Board of Commissioners
about
now. That's
intention,
yours
right?
too.
I know, but I saw it on ours. I was good enough to get it.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. Okay, so there's the city manager's role, so we're clear on that one. Here's Ashley's role. She's the only other officer that's called out in your ordinances, so I pulled her basic duties out from your ordinances. Ashley, I know one of your duties that's not on here is called other duties as assigned, which I know is a long list. But is there something else that's missing here that you should call out, or something that shouldn't be here?
I guess I'm officially the executive assistant to the Board of Commissioners.
Yep,
That's critical.
that's true, you are. Mm-hmm.
It says serves at the will of the Board of Commissioners, right? So when I request pizza, she should go get it, right?
Let's go back to that code of ethics again, back in the best interest of the city. And then, of course, there's everybody else, guys. And Your roles are prepare and deliver reports and data to the city commissioners, to manage your departments, supervise your staff, obviously provide excellent customer service, and adhere to laws. So pretty cut and dry of what your duties are, right? And so here we are, Mayor, to get to what you are interested in moving toward, and that is working together. High-performing teams do these 5 things: embrace change, achieve alignment, develop your people assets, which you've already talked about being very important to you as a city commission and a city government. Adapt your organizational structures as things change, like COVID maybe, and support experimentation and renewal. This is from the International City Management Association study recently on what high performance in city government looks like. Jim Collins said that it is vital to keep the clear distinction between what we stand for, which should never change, and how we do things, which should never stop changing, which I think is a pretty good way of thinking about what we stand for and how we do things, with being two completely different concepts. You should be adaptable and ready for change as a local government, achieve alignment, and a lot of this is alignment that we've already talked about. And then a high-performing city commissioner does these things: takes individual responsibility for the city's success, attends meetings well prepared, which means looking at agendas and materials ahead of time, being prepared to discuss complicated issues. A high-performing commissioner builds trust with and among the mayor, who is also a commissioner, with the city manager and with staff. A high-performing city commissioner does not grandstand or monopolize the discussions, but expresses opinions, even contrary ones. A high-performing city commissioner understands their role and maintains confidentiality and abides by the city's ethics code. And I will say, and we've already talked about this a little bit, is support the collective decisions of the commission. So once something's decided, the city government, including the commissioners, support that decision. And you've already said that that's something that you do pretty well. I had planned on doing a break here, but we're running out of time. Is it okay if we keep going? Does anybody need to go powder their nose or anything?
I'm gonna run out real quick. I got itchy poison ivy, but I'll be back in 2 minutes.
Okay, okay.
Well, do we want to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, you want to do 5 minutes?
Let's take
Post-it notes around on your tables somewhere, and take as many as you want, or as few as you want, but I hope you get some ideas out of paper. And Ashley and, oh, I don't know your last names. Okay, nice to meet you, Randy, and you must be chief of police. Nice to meet you.
You not abiding by the laws either, huh?
Sounds like he's
So
counting down
I
the
want you
days
all
or
to play
something.
this game too, okay?
You leaving us, chief?
Well, they don't know it's a threat or a problem.
Right, there you go.
So,
Always a possibility, right?
we're gonna focus just on the four top ones that you, just in the interest of time, that you, prioritized in an earlier exercise. But, so let's look at parks and recreation, the parks and rec plan, that is important, is one of our four top ones. So why is that important? Give me one reason, Commissioner Hall.
It's been requested by the public forever.
So it's important because it's important to the public. And how will you address that?
Well, currently, we did a master plan, and then now we have, gonna have some focus groups, and, you know, it's gonna take a while, but we're gonna bite off a little at a time.
So focus group is one way to address it, or to start on it.
Right.
The plan itself is one way to start on it. So those are two hows, right? And who will do that?
We're gonna let Earl do that. No.
Earl,
I
who
think
will do that?
we,
Parks and Rec Director and city engineer are currently working on it. Matter of fact, they just left with Baker.
Okay. So that's the idea of putting on your Post-it notes, ideas on the why, how, who, and what do you know has happened when you're done, or when it's successful. So there's likely to be 24 whys in each of those areas. So it's not just because the community wants it, it's because it will help attract industry. It will help keep kids out of trouble because they got something to do. And all kinds of different whys, for example. So I want you all to spend a few minutes. Did you all get some Post-its? Spend a few minutes on coming up with as many whys, hows, whos, and success factors that you can think of in those four areas.
handwriting is terrible.
This is the kind of thing you can get really deep in the weeds with, or the things that you can do, kind of globally, vision sorts of answers to those questions.
You're not gonna be able to read my handwriting.
None either.
Wow, I'm not surprised.
I'm left-handed.
Me
And
too.
that doesn't matter to me, I'm right-handed, it still looks like hell.
That what? Oh, yeah. I'm left-handed as can be.
Did your parents threaten to find your arm or anything?
No, I
Hurt
was-
you in the right hand?
I was one of those that saw left-handed people trying to pull their pencil, like right-handed people, they pull their pencil.
Correct.
And then I had to change that I am, because that just looks weird, you know?
I actually had a teacher in my elementary school that suggested to my family that really they should put my arm in cast so that I couldn't use it. Because I would be disabled all my life. if I was in it.
Yeah, no. I was always thinking before
Have you ever shopped at Lefty's Left-Handed Store online?
No.
I bought my mouth on
Do they have left-handed shirts?
It's awesome. I bought
There's no such thing as that.
Well, I know, I couldn't copy those the opposite sex.
Oh, there you go. So I didn't think about that.
But no, I bought her some knives, because she was always saying, the knife, the blade is on the wrong side, so they have those, and they have, take photos, they have notebooks.
Okay.
It's pretty, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. There was all kinds of stuff.
Think about last year. There's an existing thing that kind of big,
Oh, wow. So everybody had a lesson with that?
No, but.
Oh, but they experienced it.
No, one of my examples was that
Yeah.
these women saying, the first time they left the west,
For each
Oh.
question,
they just,
your other
I
option.
remember, and I still had to describe it, Jim, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Women said, wow, we got to start looking for that.
That's true though. I remember that in the good old days with the little wooden cutout.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
And I was expressing that, I was love that this one.
Really?
I sat down, and the reach for stuff, and it was all over there.
Earl, I went to this,
We're trying to cut the left hand and scissors.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
My husband's left-handed. That's never, okay, that's no big deal. I just use my left hand. It's not working, it's not working.
Well, kindergarten teachers told me that the last 16 years. Irving was right. We take everything you got.
We do. about it through your experience yourself.
Well, while we're finishing up putting those on the board, Earl, you got a pretty good start on a good priority work plan, commissioners' feelings about what's important and ways to achieve that.
I can see what you're doing.
If I can read your writing,
Yeah.
if I can read your writing, I will put this into a.
Or we can do that for you if you need to, but yeah, I get you. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And I economized on paper because I put all 4 of mine on one.
I did
I did some of that too.
You saved a tree, Mike.
I know it.
So, I planned on doing all of mine, and so I've got those, if you all want to continue something like this, as a team.
Yeah, I'd like to do that as staff, because
Yeah.
once you get down below the broad subject of economic development, you know, other than financing, yeah, it'd be something I would love to do with the remaining ones with staff.
Yeah, and, get staff input on it as well. Yeah, absolutely. So that's one technique for achieving alignment. The more that you, are in alignment on the what, which you're in total alignment on that, the why, the how, the who, and the what it looks like when it's successful, the more successful you will actually be. You notice I didn't talk about how you will behave. So that's something that I wanted to call out specifically because you're a city government and need to make decisions and need to debate information among yourselves, and you'll have different ideas about what success looks like. So I just want you to know, recognize that you're always going to have conflict. It's always going to exist. You cannot get away from it. It's natural. Regular debate helps to resolve that. And destructive conflict laced with politics is laced with politics, pride, and competition, but healthy conflict is centered on the pursuit of truth. So I want you all to be thinking about how to pursue truth, and trust is one way to do that. And if you can engage in healthy conflict, you will create better, richer decisions for the better interests of the city of Danville. Tactics for managing conflict include focusing on the facts, getting the facts, first of all, making sure they're complete and accurate and truthful, and then focus on those. Multiply the alternatives that you're using by having selection of not just we'll do this or we'll do this, but let's do one of these 6 things and come up with what those 6 things are. The more you engage in either or kind of discussions, the more people will take sides, will dig in, and when there's an either or kind of situation, oh no, public is hanging on my every word, I'm sure, but when you have multiple alternatives, you can change your mind a lot easier between 2 similar ones and not look like you're caving. It makes better decisions. Create common goals. You've got 9 right here, and I'm sure there are 19 others attached to each of those 9 as well. Use humor. Humor is a way to relax people. People make better decisions when they're in a good mood, studies say, and they're more likely to trust and agree with one another and come up with good, solid decisions when they're in a good mood. So use humor when you can. And there's been a little bit of humor here in the morning, so I know you got that in you. So use it to your advantage. And seek qualified consensus. You don't have to agree on everything. You can disagree, get your point across, get your opinion out, but then come up with some sort of an overall consensus in managing that conflict. And then finally, effective meetings. And these are important for a city commission to pay attention to. Understand your norms for discussion. Be respectful, honest, open. Confront your disagreements with each other safely using good practices, good conflict practices. If you need to have a deep dive discussion or something very controversial, you might want to schedule a separate planning meeting for those situations. I know Earl alluded to that. Some cities do that. Every other meeting is a more deep dive kind of meeting. The city of Covington went to that in their city manager plan. Went to that a few years ago, and their meetings seem to be much less divisive, much more productive, because they can really discuss those things. I don't know that that's something that you all want to do, but it's something to think about.
I will say this on that, we do need to think about that, just because it can be healthy.
Yeah.
And so I would ask you all to contemplate that, we'll bring that up at a regular commission meeting, we can talk about whether or not we restructure those.
I'd like to hear more about what that looks like.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can put you in touch with the mayor or the city manager's new there, so I don't know him, but the mayor in Covington, if you want me to. Meetings should include.
Where is this person?
Covington, Kentucky? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I got that much.
It's in Cincinnati.
Thank you.
Meetings should have a well-researched agenda. The board packets, Ashley, should be reasonably sized so that they're easily digested. They should include regular program reports from staff, from content area specialists in the community. They should include data and dashboards to make it easy to digest and easily understood, and devote time for ample citizen input, commission discussion of key issues, and long-range strategic, not tactical planning at each meeting, so that you're working on your strategy. Even though I know a lot of what you do is tactical, you're working on your strategy overall all the time.
It seems to me that bullet point number 3
Meetings?
is appropriate under bullet point number 2, because if we did bullet point number 3 at the time that we were doing bullet point number 4,
I'm lost.
if we tried to do a deep dive during a commission meeting, we'd be here for 3 days.
Right. Which is why a special planning meeting
The deep
would
dive
be.
needs to occur then.
Yes, absolutely.
And once we've done the deep dive, then you have your commission meeting, city input, commission discussion of key issues.
Right.
And that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, how do we
Yeah.
restructure that a little bit?
We're on the same page.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we're getting more and more things, quote unquote, to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, with all of that said, you're creating for yourself a successful city. As we've talked today, I'm not going to go through these slides because they would take too long, but this is what the city, what's the name of the organization? Living Cities and Governing Magazine did a study a couple of years ago that came up with these characteristics for successful cities.
You're going to give us all these slides or somehow?
If you want them, you're welcome to them.
Absolutely.
So we're getting to the end of our time together. I'm 3 minutes over, so please excuse me for going over. But when we began this morning, I asked each of you to commit to that one key goal of making and keeping Danville the thriving, healthy city. And you committed to that goal today. And I hope that our conversation today has even helped you further along down that key vision. So does anybody want to give some key takeaways that you've got from our discussion today? Anything, aha moment or insights or things you want to study on a little bit more from today?
I have a question for the commission, and I see my role as providing some kind of communication and leadership for the entire commission. If we can talk about it, if that's not how you see it, but if it is, what's the best way for me to communicate so that if Denise has a particular angle that Jay's hadn't, or I haven't, then how do we maximize that so I can say to Earl, hey, you need to be prepared to address this particular aspect of that issue?
I think a lot of it is the rapport that you all build among yourselves.
Let me
And
ask it this way, does the commission even want me to touch base between commission meetings?
Are you talking about how do you gain consensus without violating laws?
Not so much that,
Just keep us all informed with the same info.
well, yeah, and just, I guess when I feel like I'm doing my role in making sure we kind of stay efficient and focused. And part of that is to, again, if three people say essentially the same thing and two people say something different that has not even been brought up before, then to make that meeting efficient, if they don't do it themselves, I need to take that one off and say, Earl, we got to have this data to have a productive conversation.
Right.
See,
And
in
that-
our form of government, I have always tried to do that step directly. So, I mean, I'll call
And-
individual commissioners and give them the freedom to express their opinion directly to me.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to, or at least that's my philosophy, is I've tried to steer what I'm doing around what I see as the consensus amongst all of you. Now, that means that individually, as that consensus is being built, you might lose influence over what that consensus is as an individual commissioner or mayor, and then, but, so, I think that's, if you, as an elected official, are trying to build your own consensus, you gotta do that on your own terms, right? But I think the city manager, from a government, the city manager is still obligated to hear from everybody individually.
And that's the form of government that you've selected. So really,
So in other words, Denise didn't like dogs in the cemetery as a recent conversation. She may reach out to everybody and say, look, dogs belong in the cemetery, right? Like, she's able to lobby you all, but in terms of what that policy ultimately looks like, we may form our opinion around gathering information from all of you all, and we may come up with a recommendation that we think best fits everything described to us by all five of you individually, and then you all can vote that up or down.
Let me be clear. I do not see my role as lobbying. I want to hear what she has to say. I want to hear what she has to say. Kevin and JH too. So that way, again, when you're sitting in that middle chair, JH, you got to be able to kind of facilitate and make sure things keep moving and that kind of thing. And so if I kind of have some idea as to, where everybody is on it, and if there's one person that's holding back but has a strong opinion, I may say to that person, Kevin, what do you think? Tell us, Kevin. And that way Kevin I've opened the door for him. He's not out there by himself.
it comes down to, was it JH that wanted pink roads?
Don't peek everything.
You want pink everything.
'Cause
So,
he's in drag.
so if Kevin doesn't care one way or the other, but if you call him out in the meeting, then he gives his opinion, then, yeah. Yeah,
Or
but,
I got plenty of other things to do. I'm just asking for your honest input here.
yeah, yeah.
Let me address what he's saying, okay, because I've been around a few weeks. What I feel best about is that before I get to before I got to the meeting Monday, there's 5 of us, 6 of us, and then the 6th person represents the staff in a sense, and then the city attorney represents whatever. So when I arrived Monday, I felt like I knew a little bit about what several of the options were for the things to be discussed.
Those multiple alternatives. Right.
And so as long as you were keeping us abreast of what the alternatives are, or what the community's saying, or what Colo's saying, we're fine. What happens in dysfunctional organizations is that they come to a meeting, there's been no communication before the meeting, and you got 5 different people waiting to express an opinion, and nobody's ever heard before. So that takes a lot of time, a lot of conflict, a lot of whatever. So I always say that the good thing that we've done since I've been on the commission is that if the mayor knows it, all 5 of us need to know it. If Jenny knows it, all 5 of us need to know it. Don't have to agree with it, just have to know it, sort of be a part of our thought process. So when we come, you sort of know. Sometimes I just know about the alternatives. I don't know who created them, where it came from. It could have come from some citizen, but we know what's going on, what's being discussed. There are no surprises, and that's what I think you've done. Your tenure as the mayor that have been different from other mayors that other mayor that I served with, but I never knew what was coming into play.
But do you want to take away, you don't want to take away completely from the very organic experience of just open communication, open,
Right,
you know?
that's right, yeah.
Instead of,
Yeah.
but you don't want things to drag on for 2 hours.
Well,
and
you
not
also
give
want to be
somebody a heads
prepared.
up.
You want to be prepared,
Right.
have it prepared open communication. Right.
But I like that just very organic element where, you know,
Mhm.
it's just
But-
very open, very open.
Right,
And that's
but
where
you're,
you
but,
talk.
but like you said,
You know,
it'll
right.
drag on forever, so it can. I mean, not
Another-
necessarily,
Another
but,
example of what we've done, and it's really been unofficial, and at times it could have been perceived by someone as being illegal. We meet down here on the 2nd and 4th Monday at 4:30. Just whoever shows up. We have organic food or whatever we have, we just sit down and talk. A lot of times we're just catching up with each other. Sometimes an issue on the agenda does come up. We don't vote on anything, we don't make any decisions, but if someone's got a new suggestion, a new idea about it, we might intervene at that last point before the meeting starts. And that's good.
And there is a difference in having an open dialogue and organic, as if you want to use that word,
Yeah.
than being blindsided.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
we want open and honest communication,
Yeah,
but we don't want anyone to be blindsided.
yeah, and I don't think we've had, well, maybe I'm wrong. Very many instances of somebody being blindsided, sitting there in public eye at a meeting. I think we rewarded a lot of that. That's why our meetings have gone on so smoothly and so organized.
yeah, okay,
I think.
yeah.
That's what.
So, just to be clear, in the city manager form of government, the mayor is also a commissioner
Yes,
who has a few other duties.
yes.
So he is one of you, but he has additional duties as assigned, as we talked about earlier. Basically, preside over the meetings and sign city contracts and documents, and isn't that about it officially,
No,
Earl?
no, it's
No,
not
but-
at all.
Well, it's,
But we
and
we
be,
have to act as a body.
Right.
Right,
One of the duties I take seriously is not making negative headlines.
that's a really important duty.
Not creating fodder for the media.
Yep. And to do that,
I think
You
2
got-
commissioners have seen enough of that.
you gotta have open and regular communication. You gotta build rapport with each other and trust with each other, and you gotta involve your city staff, or your city staff has to be involved in that whole infrastructure, that whole culture, so that that doesn't happen. And I want to stop here for a second. And remember, I mentioned the introverts need time to get some points out. And Commissioner Cotto, I don't know if you're an introvert or not, but
Listen,
we
no,
haven't heard a whole lot from you today.
obviously don't know
So
Commissioner
I
Carl.
would love, I have heard that he's our comedian. So either give us that sense of humor that you're so famous for, or help sum up the morning for us.
I would be glad to. Could you go over it again?
Sure,
See what
let
I
me
mean?
go back.
See what I mean?
Well, actually, what I took from it is we're actually doing a lot of things, I think we're doing a lot of things well. And like anything else, there's several things we could work on. And I think the things we can work on are things that can be, I don't want to say fixed, but they can be improved on without a lot of, strain and a lot of gnashing of teeth or anything. So I'm pretty pleased with how we're doing, and I'm pleased with the ideas we have going forward.
Well, I will say this, that the city of Danville is kind of the shining light of small cities in Kentucky. I think you've got more going for you as a city than most any of the small cities and towns in all of Kentucky.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
The opportunities that you have are also great. You've got great resources. You've got, one of the most respected colleges in the country, a block that way. And you've got great city staff. And I know from spending the morning with you all that you've got a committed city commission. And so therefore, I know that your comment, you ain't seen nothing yet, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're on the precipice of some great things happening in this city under the mayor's leadership, your leadership, and of course your new city manager's leadership as well. So thank you for your conversation today, your attention today, and for sticking with me an extra 15 minutes. Really good discussion today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So I'm going to call each one of you separately, and I'm going to ask the question. What kind of communication do you want from me prior to a meeting? That's the answer. That's the answer.
Hey, Kevin,
What's that?
I oftentimes just don't answer.
That's right. Well, that's what he said. That's what he said down there. That's what he said down there. And the other thing I want, this was something that hit me the other day. And Earl, I want you to think about selling this to staff. Yes, we're selling services, but you're selling credibility too. Jenny sells credibility at her store. Jade sells credibility as an educator. All of us sell credibility. And so meeting the public, answering the phone, understanding that it's a heck of a nice place to work, but there's no guarantee. We sell credibility to the taxpayer, that we're attentive to their needs, that we're efficient with their money, and that can be as simple as answering the phone on the second try. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay. Earl,
Yes, ma'am.
I turn it over to you.
Listen, I appreciate everything. We will try to figure out a way to follow up so that we have a continuation of rapport building and healthy development, and that's necessary. We've met in a similar way as this, at least one other time. And, it's something we need to keep doing, and staff will take these charts and talk about them, and we'll try to have a follow-up meeting sometime. And when we say follow-up meeting, that's not next week, that's an appropriate time frame.
Sure.
Better set a date.
Yeah, see?
Set
Better
it
set a
down.
date, better
Now-
set it quickly.
Now, is he fingers in right there, or was
Sometimes
he,
fall
noses
next year.
in? Noses in.
Well, it's like herding cats. It's like herding cats.
Yeah, pretty
Well,
much,
the
yeah.
other thing I would say about this one is that you have shown us that in getting together to have these kinds of conversations, 2 hours is definitely not enough time.
That's true. That's true.
And it takes as long as it takes.
Yeah, that's a really good point, yeah. When are you done? When you're done. not when the clock says,
So let me
right?
ask my fellow commissioners, are you, since we kind of skipped over some of these or kind of hit the high points, are you suggesting that we have a second meeting to drill down a little deeper? You may not want to answer that now, but
I think we
What I'd like to do, Mayor, to your point, is follow up with her and brainstorm about what she learned about us today. It's always good to have somebody else give you their opinion too about what they think about you, and rather than us always trying to self-reflect. But I would like to, if I could, at least take a minute with her and let her digest what's on the board up there, and then maybe even invite her back to follow up, rather than us do that.
and
I'd
when
be
you
honored.
when you
It's a
talk to
beautiful
her,
city.
these results,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see the staff only results.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to see what they think by themselves.
Yes, sir. Will do.
I'd like to see both, actually. But don't wait too long, Earl, for us to come back and follow up. Like, if we could do that before the end of the year and before we get into the,
She's available next
We
week.
should anticipate that before Christmas, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because one,
We-
after
yeah,
Christmas,
we-
we know
The
that's
reason I
about.
say that is because we've got a lot of, some things that we have to do where we're in and out of town.
Yep.
With, some of our, our visits to like, with economic development folks. So November's gonna fill up pretty quick, and then with Thanksgiving, so it's likely gonna be December.
Good time.
that's fine. First part of December.
Yeah.
You need a motion
Thank
to
you all
adjourn.
for joining us. I hope you didn't feel like it was a waste of time.
Motion
Alright.
to adjourn? I don't know. Do you need, that's why I was asking, do you need one?
Good discussion, really good discussion. Yeah.
Do we have to?
Yeah.
Well, we did call, nobody officially called us to order, so I guess we do need it.
I will say this, just as a employee, and as a taxpayer, I will give this credit, and when Rick was here too, not just Jimmy, so the last 6 people that we've had in this chair as a body have been really open, talking, and that helps. Tony, you've been here longer than me, would you agree with that or disagree with that general statement? Like, generally, you can feel what they're thinking.
I think it's been better the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. That helps a lot.
So I would say congratulate yourselves on that. Give yourselves a round of applause for that, for sure.
That helps staff at least. We
Absolutely.
know what you're thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I have one comment. I've never been on a board before, maybe an S corp, but not like a board, so I didn't know how they worked and stuff. So this has been very educational for me.
Good,
especially.
good. So it's been time well
Right,
spent?
Right.
Good,
Well, I took
good.
notes on basics other people probably knew, but I
Right.
didn't. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
learned a lot. Thank you.
Well, good, good. Good to hear. Good to hear. All right, thank you all.